Why did you kill my mother? Before to start the video, click the subscribe button and press the bell icon for watching more videos and give a comment about video. Why you kill my mother? You probably don't know my name, and maybe that's for the best. I've spent the last 3 years being a headline, a soundbite, a face behind trembling news captions that read "Daughter seeks justice." But before all of that, I was just a barista in Seattle, trying to pay off student loans, who called her mom every night before bed. Mom's name was Elaine Porter. She was 56, a nurse, the kind of woman who still wrote grocery lists on paper and laughed at her own jokes. The night she died, it was raining so hard that the city felt like it was dissolving. And yet, that night is burned into my mind with perfect, terrible clarity. I remember the phone call. It was 11:42 p.m. A detective's voice, steady, rehearsed, told me there had been an incident. I thought maybe she'd slipped at work, maybe a car accident. You never imagine incident means murder until you hear the word homicide. I drove home on instinct, not logic. The flashing lights outside our old house made the rain glitter red and blue. There were yellow tapes across the porch where we used to hang wind chimes. And there, under a white sheet, was the outline of the woman who'd raised me alone. They said it was a burglary gone wrong. I wanted to believe that. It's easier than believing someone meant to do it. But the scene didn't fit. The jewelry box was still there, her purse untouched, only the back door broken and a single teacup shattered on the floor. At the station, Detective Ryan Keller asked routine questions. Did she have enemies, ex-husbands, money problems? I said no. Mom's world was small: work, home, her garden. But when Keller mentioned the name Mark Lawson, my stomach turned. Mark had been Mom's landlord years ago, before she bought the house. He'd been friendly, almost too friendly. I remembered him bringing flowers, fixing things that weren't broken. When she told him she didn't need his help anymore, he turned cold. I hadn't thought about him in years. That night, I sat alone in the apartment, her phone on my lap. Every text felt like a breadcrumb leading back through time. Reminders about dinner, jokes, photos of her cat, and then one message stood out, sent just 3 days before she died. He's been watching the house again. I showed it to Detective Keller the next morning. His expression didn't change, but he scribbled something down. "We'll look into it," he said. The following week was a blur of condolences and silence. Funerals are strange. They make people talk about weather instead of grief. Reporters called. I refused interviews. I wanted answers, not sympathy. Then came the first mistake I made. I started investigating myself. I visited Mom's neighbors. One woman said she'd seen a dark pickup truck idling near the corner for nights before the murder. Another mentioned hearing voices around 10 p.m. That night, a man shouting, then a door slam. I wrote everything down, like a journalist who'd forgotten she was the story. One night, I went back to the house. The police had released it. The silence inside was unbearable. I noticed things they hadn't taken. Her planner on the kitchen counter, still open to that week. In her neat handwriting was an appointment. Is greater than Friday, 8 p.m. ML. My heart pounded. M.L. Mark Lawson. The police hadn't told me about that. When I gave Keller the planner, he finally admitted Lawson had been questioned. His alibi was weak. He claimed he'd been at a bar alone. But there was no physical evidence linking him to the scene, nothing to hold him on. I saw the frustration in Keller's eyes. He wanted this solved as badly as I did, but procedure tied his hands. I gave the number to Keller. It was a prepaid phone, untraceable. That was when he started taking extra precautions, parking petrol cars near my place. But fear is strange. It doesn't just make you hide, it makes you reckless. I began watching Mark Lawson. His address was public record, a small house on the outskirts of Tacoma with a half collapsed porch and a rusted mailbox. I parked across the street at night, telling myself it was closure I wanted, but deep down it was rage. One evening, he came out carrying a garbage bag. He threw it in the trunk of his truck and drove off. I followed him, highway lights streaking the windshield, my heart keeping time with the wipers. He stopped at an old quarry road, got out, and tossed the bag down a ravine. After he left, I climbed down. Inside the bag were burnt scraps of paper and melted plastic. Among them, I found something half charred but legible, a prescription label with my mother's name. I took photos and sent them to Keller. He told me to leave it to them now. A warrant followed within 48 hours. They searched Lawson's property and found pieces of jewelry hidden under floorboards, one of them Mom's cross pendant. The night they arrested him, I stood outside the house shaking. Keller said, "You did good, Rachel, but remember, you shouldn't have gone near him." I nodded, but inside, I felt nothing. Justice didn't feel like triumph. It felt like breathing after drowning. At the preliminary hearing, Lawson pled not guilty. His lawyer argued the jewelry was planted and that I was an obsessed daughter framing an innocent man. The defense tried to paint me as unstable, grief-stricken. Maybe I was, but truth has a way of bleeding through lies. Forensics came back, Lawson's fingerprints on the teacup shards, traced blood on his jacket matching my mother's DNA. When Keller showed me the report, I cried for the first time since the night of the call. Then came the confession, but not from Lawson. It was from his brother, who turned himself in 2 weeks before the trial. He claimed he'd helped Lawson break into my mother's house to scare her, because Lawson wanted her to remember who she owed. It was supposed to be intimidation, not murder. But when she fought back, he hit her. The court transcripts describe it clinically: blunt force trauma, defensive wounds, immediate fatality. To me, it was the final theft. He stole her last heartbeat. During the trial, I sat in the front row every day. Lawson avoided my eyes until sentencing. When the judge read life without parole, he finally looked at me and whispered something I'll never forget. "She made me do it." I never learned what he meant: delusion, guilt, or some twisted need for control. Maybe it doesn't matter. Afterward, Keller asked if I wanted to make a statement. I said yes. Cameras turned on, microphones extended, and I said the only thing that felt true is greater than justice doesn't bring peace, it just stops the bleeding long enough to heal. That should have been the end. But stories like mine don't fade, they echo. True crime podcast called Documentaries wanted exclusive rights. I refused them all, because this right now is my version, direct, unedited, from me to you. If you're watching this or reading it, remember, evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it wears a neighbor's smile. Sometimes it remembers your birthday. I still visit her grave every Sunday. I bring white lilies and her favorite tea, Earl Grey. I talk to her like she can still answer. Maybe she can. And every time I leave, I whisper the same words, the question that became my life, the one I finally answered but will never stop asking. Why did you kill my mother? People assume that when the verdict is read, life snaps back into place. It doesn't. Justice has a beginning and an end on paper. But in the real world, it's a long echo that keeps bouncing off the walls of your life. For months after the sentencing, I woke up at the same hour the detective had called me, 1:42 a.m. I'd stare at the ceiling and wait for the silence to mean something. The house I grew up in was sold. The garden was gone. The porch repaired by strangers. Yet every corner of my mind still lived there. The police returned my mother's belongings in 2 cardboard boxes. They smelled faintly of smoke and evidence tape. Inside were her wedding ring, her nurse's badge, a few photo albums, and that teacup, the one they'd pieced together from the shards. I placed it on my kitchen shelf, cracks and all. I told myself that if it could hold together, so could I. Detective Keller called a few times after the trial. He said closure takes different forms. For him, it was the paperwork filed, the case labeled solved. For me, it was knowing the man who killed my mother would never breathe free air again. But closure is not peace. It's a pause between storms. Reporters tried again. They wanted interviews, podcasts, a Netflix special. One producer said, "Your voice could help other victims." I told her I wasn't ready to be anyone's story. I already was one. Instead, I started volunteering at a local victim support group. At first, I just sat in the back, listening to strangers speak their grief like confessions. A mother whose son was hit by a drunk driver. A man whose sister vanished 20 years ago. Pain is democratic, it doesn't care who you are. Eventually, I began to talk, not about the murder, but about what came after. The emptiness, the strange guilt of surviving. People nodded, some cried. That's when I realized healing isn't forgetting, it's learning to carry memory without letting it crush you. 3 years later, I finished my degree in criminal justice. I dropped out once because of hospital bills and chaos, but returning felt like reclaiming something. I interned at the precinct where Keller still worked. The first day he saw me, he laughed and said, "Didn't think you'd want to see this place again." I told him I wasn't there for ghosts. I was there to learn how to fight them. Working cases from the other side of the desk was surreal. Each file smelled like deja vu names, dates, alibis, photographs. Every victim's face looked a little like my mother's. Keller warned me not to blur the line between empathy and obsession. He was right. There's a point where helping others becomes a way to outrun your own pain. I slowed down, learned balance, learned when to step back. The parole hearing came sooner than I expected. Lawson's brother, the one who confessed to helping, had the chance to plead for early release. The prosecutor asked if I wanted to attend. Part of me didn't, but another part needed to look him in the eye. At the hearing, he looked smaller, older. He apologized again, voice trembling. "I think about her every night," he said. "I'm sorry for what we did." For the first time, I believed him. He'd been 19 then, frightened, following his brother's orders. The court reduced his sentence to time served with supervision. People might think I'd be angry. I wasn't. Forgiveness doesn't excuse, it just stops the poison from spreading further. After that day, I visited Mom's grave less often. Not out of neglect, but because I no longer felt she was trapped there. I began running at sunrise, a habit she'd always encouraged. The city feels different in that light, new, forgiving. Every anniversary of her death, I record a short message on my phone, not for social media, just for her. The first one was shaky. "I miss you." The last one this morning was steadier. "I'm okay, Mom." People sometimes ask me why I kept the story's title question alive, why I named the advocacy group I founded "Why You Killed My Mother." Because the question isn't only mine, it belongs to every family waiting for a call that should never come. Every daughter sitting in a courtroom wondering how someone could choose violence over mercy. It's a question that forces people to look, to think, to change. Keller retired last spring. On his last day, he handed me his badge tag and said, "You'll need this one day." Maybe he's right. I've applied to the academy. I want to work homicide not for vengeance, but for understanding. Because understanding is the closest thing to peace. Last week, I packed away the boxes of evidence and moved to a new apartment. No ghost followed. On the kitchen shelf, the cracked teacup still stands, holding a handful of white lilies. When sunlight hits it, the cracks shine like gold seams. I sit here now, speaking to you, the camera, the audience, whoever's listening, not as the woman who lost her mother, but as the woman who lived after. If this story finds you in darkness, know this. Truth can be slow, justice imperfect, but healing is real. It starts the moment you decide the story won't end with pain. So when people ask what I'd say to the man who killed my mother, I tell them the same thing I whisper every Sunday morning as the world wakes up clean and quiet. You didn't end her story, you made me write the rest.